There is no God but Allah. Allah is great.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And welcome to another episode of True Peace, the Secret of Life. And we're looking at this series at the world's fastest growing religion and most sustainable belief system in the entire universe. Yes, we're not exaggerating, the entire universe. Islam is the most sustainable belief system in the entire universe. Why is that? Because it is something that is continuously growing. It's not something that we find falling apart, changing its rules, rewriting, reinventing itself. It is sustainable. It's self-sufficient. It doesn't need any rechanges, rewrites, revisions, revised standard version. It is just one version of Islam. Even though maybe you might find a couple of different groups coming into Islam and claiming that they've got a new version of Islam, that's not Islam. Islam remains the constant same as it was from the beginning. It will always remain to the end. There might be some people who try to deviate from it, but they are not representing Islam. They're representing their own personal interests. But generally speaking, Islam has been sustainable from the day it started and will remain so till the end of time. When did Islam begin? Did Islam begin 1,400 years ago? No. Islam began in the very beginning of time. Before time was time, Islam was already there. What does Islam mean? To submit to the will of God. The whole of creation, everything that we know and everything that we do not know, is in a state of submission to Allah, whether it is aware of it or not. We as humans have the opportunity to choose between whether we want to submit or whether we do not want to submit. As we've spoken about in previous episodes, is that in the old days, I know it sounds funny to say that, but in the days of the earlier humans, they had slavery. Slavery was a common practice. And what they would do with slaves after a certain period of time, as humans became more civilized, that is, they would allow their slaves to be free after a certain amount of time. And especially if we look in Jewish tradition, we find that after a 10 or 20 or 30-year period, the slave would be set free. But some slaves enjoyed being slaves because the master was so good to them that they would go back to the master after he had freed them, and they would say to the master, please, we want to be a bond slave. And then the master would take a ring and he would put it on their finger, and that person would be a slave again, but he would be different to the rest of the slaves. He would be almost the head of the slaves, and he would have different accommodation and different food and different rights and different responsibility. And when he would walk through the streets, people would see this man and see the ring on his finger and identify him immediately as a bond slave. And even the free people, the people who own slaves, would give him respect and honor. In the same way, we as Muslims have been those people who were slaves, but we were slaves to society. We were slaves to the systems of this world that have failed. We were slaves to a system that will never please us. We were slaves to a political system that didn't work or give us satisfaction. And then at a period of time, every single person who chooses to become a Muslim gave himself over to Allah and received that marking, received that ring. And that ring is the declaration of La ilaha illallah. There is no other God worthy of worship. And we submitted to Allah, and then we acknowledged all the prophets that came before and said that we now believe that all the messengers were sent by Allah, including the final messenger, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, who came to give us the revelation that we have today, that has been unchanged. And so this is what we're looking at this series. We're looking at the Islamic framework. What makes up Islam? And today we are going to be looking at the political structure that makes up Islam. I'm not talking about politics the same way you're thinking about politics, but we're thinking about politics in the way Allah thinks about politics. Because when we look at the different dimensions of Islam, it's not just one-dimensional or two-dimensional. It's not just to do with religion. You see, Christianity, all it deals with is religion. It's more about just grace or spirituality, but there's nothing else to it. But in Islam, we've already looked at so far in the series, and we're coming towards the end of the series, we've looked at the hope structure, which is one dimension, or the belief system. We've looked at the educational system. We've looked at the spiritual structure, the morality structure, the human rights and human responsibilities that we have. the family structure, the social structure, the economic structure, and today we're looking at the political structure. There are many, many facets to what Islam is. And incidentally, many people ask, well, where did you get this idea for this talk from? This talk is taken from many different writings and from many different scholars and from many different people. But mainly it came from a group of atheists at a university in Germany who invited me, as you saw in many episodes, because I'm not going to go into all that again, but as a reminder, maybe you just come into the series. A group of atheists invited me to come and talk at the university. They were hoping to probably ensnare me or trap me with questions about the fact that God does not exist. And so about 10 minutes into the talk, I realized that this lecture is not going to work. Sometimes the lecturers, we have to change our topic midstream. And I could see on their faces, I could see that it wasn't getting anywhere. And so what I did to them, I said to them, fine, let's change the way we're doing this lecture. And I gave them pieces of paper, and I asked them to write down 10 things that they would do to have a perfect system in the world. Forget about religion, forget about politics, forget about everything. You are now the masters of this universe, just for this social experiment. Write down 10 things that you would have to have the perfect system in the world. And they broke into little groups, over 100 people, came to an agreement that one person stood up and represented 100 people and said, this is the perfect system we would have. And this is how today's program ended up coming into place. They wrote these things in place. It wasn't me that came up with them. They came up with this lecture. And they did dawah to themselves. And out of that group, about 9 of them reverted to Islam. I didn't even have to give the lecture. They gave the lecture to themselves. And to this day, I am amazed that here are atheists who are able to find truth. Because what we really looked at in one of the previous episodes is the soul hungers for truth. And if we don't tell people about the truth, it'll find it on its own. How many people's stories have we heard who reverted to Islam that not even Muslim even came near them? They went and looked for Islam. They searched it out. And what type of Muslims did they become? Great Muslims. They became Muslims that are now great scholars throughout the world. People that we read books that they've written, go to their lectures, go and listen to their talks at universities. So in Islam, Islam is more than just one-dimensional. It is made up of all these different facets that even atheists would hunger and search out for and would come up with the same structures that we are talking about. So what is Islam? If we're looking at a political system in Islam, what is Islam? Islam is the ideology of life. It is the essence of life and believing that there is only one God. Strict monotheism. Not funny monotheism that we see some religions in the world claiming. In fact, almost every religion in the world claims to be a monotheist. If you ask the Hindu, are you a monotheist? They say, yes, definitely. If you ask the Christian, oh yeah, absolutely, we're monotheists, definitely. If you ask the Buddhist, he'll say, absolutely, we're monotheists. Everybody claims to be a monotheist. But if you peel away, what do you find? It's not monotheism, it's polytheism. It's any other ism but monotheism. Islam is the only religion in life that claims, or only belief system in the world, that strictly believes in strict monotheism. And the outcome of this is that we have a system of life which brings about perfect justice. Justice could also be seen as the Sharia. So the concept of building our Islamic life is around the fact that we believe in proper monotheism. And that monotheism brings around justice. And that justice brings around accountability. And that accountability brings forward the idea of a perfect political system. Remember that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ did not come to be a politician, nor did the Prophet Isa, peace be upon him. Remember what they said to the Prophet Isa, peace be upon him? Are you the one who's going to come and fight against the Romans? Are you going to bring a new political system? And he said, no. Give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and give unto God what is God's. Give to the humans what they want. Give to God what he wants. He said, I'm not come here to bring on a new political order. When Noah, may Allah be pleased with him, came, he didn't come with a new political system after he came out of the ark and say, well, I'm going to come with a human system. No, he kept the same political system that was around from the very beginning to the end. The political system, the system of influence in Islam is very, very important, because the sphere of influence in Islam is not just one-dimensional. Remember, we keep saying this the whole time, is that Islam, the accountability that we have to society is extremely important. So the political system has to be just as important. The political system is not just a politician, a president, a prime minister, his cabinet, his ministers. No, it's more than that. It's about the administration of a government, how we are going to administer this government that we have been entrusted with. What is the political system that we are going to hold in place? What is our legal system like? What is the economic system like? What is the social responsibility of the people like? What is the religious practice of the people going to be like? What is the education system and the media going to be like? What is our defense and our capability as a military machine going to be like in our government, in this political system that we're living in? This, as you're already getting, you figured out already at home, is already what we've been discussing already. That is the political system of Islam. And this is why the political system of Islam is so successful. And this is why it's under attack. Immediately people are thinking, what about what's happening in the Arab Spring? Probably old news by now, but when we recorded this, it was news. But the Arab Spring uprising, everyone looked at the Arab Spring uprising and said, look at those crazy Muslims. If that system works, why are these things going on? But we forgot about what happened when we looked at what was happening in the UK, when the youth went and started burning down all the buildings and started their uprising. What happened to the media coverage of that and the naming of that? It was just called, oh, it's some crazy youth. It wasn't called the Christian uprising. What about what is happening in America, or still happening to this day while this recording has been done, when all the youth took to the streets and stood outside and said, we do not want this economic system anymore in America. What happened to that? Why isn't that called the Christian uprising? Well, we're going to take a break, and when we get back from the break, we'll continue talking about the political structure within Islam, inshallah.
All praise to Allah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is your brother in Islam, Mamdouh Muhammad. You're watching Peace TV, the solution for humanity.
We love to be good. A good leader, a good father, a good husband, a good son, and a good neighbor. So join us to learn the art of goodness. In our program, The Significance of Islamic Adab.
Recognize the specific qualities essential to polish your character in Significance of Islamic Adab, tomorrow at 11:30 p.m. and repeat telecast at 12:30 p.m. India on Peace TV.
An evil is approaching. A gap has appeared in the barrier of Ya'juj and Ma'juj, like this. This is part of a hadith that was spoken over 1400 years ago. And if it was near then, imagine how near it is now. My name is Muhammad Tim Humble, and in this series we explore the hadith of Sahih Muslim that speak of the trials and tribulations that are to come in the end of days.
Know and understand the signs of the final day to increase your taqwa and protect your iman in end of days. Next on Peace TV.
All praise to Allah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We are talking about the political system in Islam and how in Islam the political system is integrated and evolved into the rest of our religious practices. It's not just a religious institution that only deals with spirituality. Islam deals with every avenue of life. In Islam, the political structure deals with things like the military, how the military are to treat people. What are the rules of engagement? You know, I was speaking to a Jain on the flight from South Africa to this country, India, where I am now. And a Jain is somebody who believes in very strict vegetarianism. And in fact, the vegetable and the fruit have to commit suicide. They're not allowed to pick the fruit or not allowed to take the plant out of the ground. It basically has to kill itself, and then you can only eat it. So, and then they're very careful. I mean, you'll see some of them are totally naked, so they don't even wear clothing. But fortunately, the person next to me had clothes on. And even when they walk, they'll have like a duster in front of them that will chase all the insects out of the way in case they kill an insect or whatever. So they're quite extreme. They go to the absolute nth degree with what they believe as far as health is concerned and eating and things like that. And one of the things that amazed me when we got into talking is that the person, his understanding of the political structures was very, very limited to only what his religion made permissible. And he couldn't tell me about what their religion speaks about when it relates to war, or what it speaks about when it relates to battles and things like that. And I said to him, you know what, there's something very interesting about Islam. That in Islam, when we are talking about going into a battle or to a war, we have restrictions on us. You can't disturb birds or animals that are nesting. You can't destroy the livelihood of the people, like the crops that they're growing. You can't kill somebody or attack someone who reverts, who converts. There are so many rules to a simple battle. How many countries in the world, how many political systems in the world even have that? Let's have a look at the structures that we do have in the political systems in the world today. They say no waterboarding. What does that mean? It means you can't get caught waterboarding, or that you're not allowed to do waterboarding. You're not allowed to torture a prisoner. Does that mean you're not allowed to torture them or mustn't get caught torturing them? You see, in Islam, there's no gray areas like that. There's no nonsense like that. It's not permissible, full stop. If the person is a prisoner of war, he needs to be treated exactly the same as everyone else. Do we see that happening in the Western world? Do we see that happening in Africa? Do we see that happening in China? In any country in the world, do you see that happening? That is not run by the Islamic principles of politics. This is the difference between Islam and any other religion in the world. In Islam, even the media is treated differently to the way the media is treated in the world. Do you know that most of the media in the world today have 4 S's on the beginning of their ticket? You know when you get a ticket and you want to board onto an airplane? Their ticket starts with S, 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 S. It means this person must be screened again. A journalist, he is treated like the Muslims are treated now. A journalist is seen as a traitor because he dares to ask questions. And he can be searched, he can be turned down from being permitted into a country. So much for the freedom of the journalist, so much for the freedom of the press. And by the way, a lot of Muslim scholars, next time you get onto an airplane, check for your 4 S's in front of your boarding pass. I'm quite sure you already have it. So this means you're scrutinized. You are no longer a normal human being. But in Islam, the media are protected. The media are permitted. Yes, some people will say they went to a country and they were a woman journalist and they weren't permitted to go into a certain area. Maybe it was the way you were dressed. If I walked into a Christian gathering with CNN and they had a whole lot of Christians there, and I walked in like this, I'm quite sure they would tell me not to come in as well. It's the way we have to dress for the appropriate places that we're going to. There is a standard that we have in society. And so in the same way, Islam has the way that it treats the media is totally different because our political system explains how we must treat people. In the media, our structure of our political system teaches us that we don't take money out of education and use that money from education and use it for the military, like we see many countries in the world doing. Well, there's no money, so let's take it out of education and use that money for the military. Our political system will not allow that to happen. Our political system does not allow us to take money from the economic system and put it into the administration system. Each system is run independently but cohesively together as one whole structure. This is why the political system in Islam is the most important system, because it holds everything together. It is a system of life. Even though we might see certain countries abusing that power, who claim to be Muslim countries, we need to have a country in the world that is actually run by the Sharia again. But the system that we run our houses in is a miniature political system. And you and I have the opportunity, if you're a Muslim at home, to change the political structure of your home. You have the opportunity to incorporate this into your community. What about having more lectures in your community about the way that we can look at how we can change the politics of our area. I'll give you an example. And I'm very patriotic. I love my country. I am a South African. I'm very proud South African. I'm very proud of my country. And I believe in my country. But there's many problems with the political system in my country. So what did the Muslims do? There are only 3% Muslims in my country. We're only 3%. We're tiny. We're not even a blip on the radar in the percentage-wise. When they come out with the statistics every year of different religions, we don't even get put on the mark. They tell you how many African traditional religions there are, how many Indian religions there are, how many Afrikaans religions, how many British religions, but they don't even bother putting in how many Muslims there are because you're not even enough to even count. It won't even show on the graph. Yet, we are in every political structure in the country. We are on all the economic structures in the country. We have representatives in every single board. Every single bank in my country has a Sharia-compliant department within it. You can have a Sharia-compliant account with every single bank in my country. No bank does not have that in my country. You have the right to leave the school on a Friday to go to mosque because you have the rights, because we have people that have passed that law. Every single part of our Islamic identity is protected in the constitution of my country. My country will support Muslim rights over any other rights in the country. Yet we are only 3%. How did that happen? It took a few people to stand up and say, we will not go silently into the night. We will affect the structures of our country, the economic structures, the social economic structures, the political structures. Every structure we made sure that we were involved in. And that's how things changed. Some countries are sitting with 80% Muslim and have not been able to accomplish that. Why? You have the power to do it, go do it. It doesn't mean that we are trying to overthrow the government. We're working with the government. There was a meeting recently, an economic conference in my country, and they invited all the ministers, the political ministers of the economy, political figures that are involved in accounting and business in our country, and they invited them to the conference. And they walked away saying, we are going to implement these things. We're going to take these back to our government, and we're going to implement them into our normal structures. Simple things that you can do in your own country. Don't expect somebody else to come and do it. The little man on the street can do it. If we were only 3% were able to accomplish that, if you look at all the names, Google it. Go and Google the South African political system today and have a look at all the surnames, and you'll see the majority of the most important positions are held by Muslims in the country. How did that happen? It happened because a few people stood up and said, we're going to be counted in the system. The political system of Islam is very, very beautiful. It makes common sense. And as we said before, what is common sense? I'm sure you all know by now if you've been watching the series. It's common sense because we were all born with it. If it wasn't common sense, it would be called something else. It's called common sense because every single one of us were born with it. It's no mystical thing. It's something that we all got. If you can take a group of 100 atheists and they can come up with the system of life that I've been sharing with you over the last few weeks, then it is common sense that the religion of Islam is something that every single human being will understand and be able to implement into their day-to-day lives, into the political structures, into the economic structures that you have. If you are a new person that hasn't heard anything about Islam before, or perhaps you've been tuning or flipping channels where you are now and you suddenly come onto Peace TV, and this is the first time you've heard anything about Islam, I encourage you to contact the Islamic Research Foundation. If you don't know how to find them, I'm going to give you the website. Just go to peacetv.tv or peacetv.in and you'll be able to get all the information. Send them an email. Ask them to send you information about Islam. Ask them to give you maybe a copy of the series or how to find the series online, where you're able to go and read and listen, perhaps listen to all the previous episodes that have come before this. Find out how Islam is so important belief system that it has changed whole political systems in the world already. There are countries that are looking at the Islamic model, that are looking at the system and saying, we should have implemented that. The economic system of this world is collapsing. We're seeing it all around us, falling apart. People are seriously looking at the economic system and saying, we should implement this. People are now looking at the Sharia, who were so terrified of the Sharia. They've now got scholars in America that are studying the Sharia system and saying, you know what, we thought it was just one-sided. Now we're looking at it and we're going, wow, this is a system that will actually save us billions of dollars every year. And that it's